Welcome to another episode of Managerial Accounting. I'm Michael McLaughlin, PhD, CPA, and professional wrestler. In today's episode, we're going to discuss activity-based costing, or ABC for short. ABC is a cost system that can be used to measure the cost of providing a good or a service, calculate the profitability of a company's product lines, and perform customer profitability analysis. The possibilities are endless, like when you let a dog loose in a casino. Now, there are many types of cost systems: job costing, operation costing, process costing, but ABC stands apart from these traditional cost systems because it's more accurate. Traditional cost systems rely on a single volume-based cost driver like machine hours or direct labor hours to allocate overhead to products. This can lead to distorted product costs when the cost driver isn't correlated with overhead. If you allocate overhead based on direct labor hours, for example, you're assuming that an increase in direct labor hours will create more overhead. But what if direct labor hours aren't closely related to overhead? Your cost system will arbitrarily allocate overhead costs, and your cost figures will be meaningless. This can be a real problem if you set prices based on costs. You might think it costs just $1 to make this ramen noodle hair protector, so you set the price at $2. But what if it really costs $5 to make the product? You'd be selling the product at a loss. Thus, traditional cost systems have largely become obsolete. You'll get bad cost information if you allocate the overhead using a single volume-based cost driver. And the rise of automation has made this problem even worse. Increased automation means that overhead accounts for a greater proportion of companies' costs. And the more overhead a company has, the more important it is to allocate that overhead in a sensible way. That's a lot to take in, so let's summarize what we've learned. If you're bald like me, you don't need a product like this or even this. Instead, you could buy something like this. So what makes ABC better than traditional cost systems? With traditional cost systems, you lump all the overhead into a single bucket, and then you spread the overhead to products using a single cost driver that may or may not even be related to overhead. But with ABC, you logically identify the activities that cause overhead to be incurred. Then you group the overhead into cost pools based on the activity type, calculate activity rates for each of these cost pools, and then use the activity rates to assign overhead costs to the cost object, which could be a product, a customer, or a department. Thus, with ABC, you're identifying all the different activities that drive overhead costs, and then you're allocating overhead costs accordingly. With ABC, costs are allocated based on cause and effect relationships, not using a single arbitrary cost driver. For example, let's say that Santa's Toy Manufacturing makes 2 different toys and has $10 million in overhead costs. For those of you who don't know, Santa Claus is a guy who sneaks into people's homes at the end of each year to leave presents, eat cookies, and steal people's credit cards. Santa wants to compare the profitability of his 2 products, teddy bears and dolls. But Santa didn't pay attention in accounting class, so he simply allocates overhead to products using a single cost driver, machine hours. Multiplying the overhead rate of $3 a machine hour to the number of machine hours for each product results in $450,000 of overhead being allocated to the teddy bear product line and $300,000 of overhead being allocated to the dolls. We then add the cost of direct materials used and the cost of direct labor and divide by the total number of units to find the cost per unit, which is $6 a unit for the teddy bear product line and $4.50 a unit for the dolls. This is the result we get with traditional costing. Fortunately, Santa's helper did pay attention in accounting class, and she shows Santa how to use ABC. With ABC, we first identify the various activities that cause overhead to be incurred. We do this by interviewing Santa's workers, and we learn that 15% of the overhead is caused by machine time, 30% of the overhead is caused by inspections, and 55% of the overhead is caused by setups for production runs. We then assign overhead to each of these 3 cost pools based on these percentages. Next, we calculate the activity rate for each of these cost pools. Note that instead of having a single overhead rate, we actually have 3 rates: 45 cents a machine hour, $22.50 per inspection, and $825 per setup. We then multiply these activity rates by the corresponding activity level for each product line. After adding the cost of direct materials used and direct labor to the overhead, we divide by the total number of units to find the cost per unit for each product line. And it turns out that the doll is actually more expensive to produce than the teddy bear. This is the opposite of what the traditional cost system told us. Santa had no idea the costs were so different. He also had no idea that identity theft is a crime, and he's currently on the run from the police. So now you've seen how ABC first allocates the cost to cost pools and then allocates the cost of products using the activity rates. This is sometimes called a two-stage allocation. But there's another difference between ABC and traditional cost systems that pertains to manufacturers. Both US GAAP and IFRS state that inventoriable costs, aka product costs, include three things: the cost of direct materials, the cost of direct labor, and manufacturing overhead. But because ABC is all about finding the most accurate, relevant cost, this definition of what constitutes a product cost is often ignored. When a company is calculating the cost per unit of a product with ABC, the company might include some non-manufacturing costs and assign them to the cost of the product, or it might exclude some manufacturing costs from the product. For example, the wages of a security guard who watches the factory are technically a product cost. But when choosing to calculate the cost of a product using ABC, you might decide to exclude the cost of the security guard's wages because it's really a cost of having a factory and not a cost of making any particular product. In addition, you might choose to include some non-manufacturing costs in the cost per unit, like warranty costs or sales commissions. For example, let's say that Santa's toy manufacturing has had some problems with product quality. Thus, the company decides to include warranty costs in its overhead when calculating the per unit cost of a product using ABC. The total overhead of $900,000 is thus allocated among 4 cost pools, and we then calculate activity rates for each cost pool and allocate the overhead to the products, just like we did before. The only difference is that we're now assigning a non-manufacturing cost to the product. An adjustment like this would not be allowed when creating financial statements according to US GAAP or IFRS because warranty costs are not a product cost. Thus, a manufacturer that wants to adopt activity-based costing would need to maintain 2 separate cost systems, one for external reporting, the financial statements, and another for internal decision-making, ABC. That can be difficult. It's like having to manage not just 1, but 2 Instagram accounts for your cat. As you can see, there are a lot of differences between ABC and traditional cost systems. But I've been holding out on some bad news. As great as ABC is, not all companies use it. That's about as sad as an out-of-work wedding crasher. Now, there are many reasons a company might choose not to use ABC. Manufacturers find it costly to maintain 2 cost systems. It's time-consuming to interview employees to identify the various cost pools. Employees might overstate the amount of time they spend on various activities so they don't look lazy. ABC results in a massive amount of data that takes time to analyze. And that's if you even manage to implement ABC, which could be an arduous process that takes years, particularly if you have some employees resisting the new system. Thus, even though ABC results in the most accurate cost figures, some executives don't think it's worth the hassle. Now, wasn't this lesson exciting? Watching accounting videos online is way more exciting than watching Game of Thrones, climbing a tower, or reading a newspaper that's on fire. So remember what you've learned today. ABC is more accurate than traditional cost systems. ABC isn't easy to implement. And never give your bank password to someone dressed as Santa. I hope you found this helpful. Bye-bye.